They say you never really know someone until they betray you. That the people closest to you can hide entire lives behind a smile, behind a hug, behind words like, "I love you," and I never believed that. Not until the day I stood in an airport terminal holding a bouquet of white roses, my heart racing with 3 years of longing, and watched my husband walk through those arrival doors with another woman's hand in his, with 2 small children clutching his legs, with a life I knew nothing about written all over his face. And when that woman turned around and I saw her eyes, her nose, the curve of her mouth that mirrored my own mother's, I realized that the person who had destroyed my marriage wasn't a stranger at all. It was Sarah, my baby sister, the girl I raised, the girl I sacrificed everything for. And what happened after that moment nearly cost me my home, my career, and my grandmother's life. This isn't just a story about betrayal. This is about what happens when a quiet woman finally decides she will not be buried by other people's sins. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. My name is Rebecca, and for most of my life, I was the strong one. I was 19 when my parents died in a car accident, leaving behind me my 15-year-old brother Daniel and my 12-year-old sister Sarah. One moment we were a normal family, and the next we were orphans trying to figure out how to survive. A social worker told us we'd likely be separated into different foster homes because I was barely an adult with no means to support 2 children. I remember Sarah crying into my shoulder, whispering, "Please don't let them take us away." So I made a promise that day. I would hold us together. I dropped out of college where I'd just started my 2nd year studying nursing. I took 3 jobs working as a waitress during breakfast shifts, a receptionist in the afternoons, and cleaning offices at night. I came home smelling like grease and disinfectant, but I made sure there was food on the table, that my siblings had clean clothes and school supplies. After 6 months of proving I could provide, the state allowed me to become their legal guardian. Those were the hardest months of my life, but I kept us together. And for years, that was enough. Sarah was special. Everyone said so. She had this light about her, this way of making people feel important. By the time she turned 17, she had colleges sending her recruitment letters, boys leaving notes in her locker, teachers predicting she'd do something extraordinary. I was so proud of her. When she got into a good university with a partial scholarship, I worked extra shifts to cover the rest. I wanted her to have everything I couldn't have, all the opportunities my parents would have given her. That's when I met Nathan. I was 25, exhausted from years of being everyone's rock, and he walked into the diner where I still worked weekend shifts. He was handsome in an understated way, with kind brown eyes and a gentle voice. He left a note on his receipt that said, "You have a beautiful smile. I hope your day gets easier." Something about that simple kindness broke through the walls I'd built. When he kept coming back, always leaving those little notes, I started to believe that maybe I deserved something good too. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. Nathan was a contractor who specialized in international projects, building schools and community centers in developing countries. When he was home, he was completely present. He met my grandmother and charmed her with his promises to take care of me. Sarah adored him. She called him her favorite person and joked that she wished she'd met him first. We all laughed at that. I remember thinking how lucky I was that my family loved him as much as I did. We got married in a small ceremony at my grandmother's church with Sarah as my maid of honor. She helped me pick out my dress and whispered in my ear as I walked down the aisle, "You deserve this, Becca. You deserve everything." 6 months after the wedding, Nathan got an offer for a major project overseas, a 3-year contract in Dubai that would pay more than we'd ever dreamed of. We decided he would go, that we'd visit when we could, that 3 years would fly by, and then we'd start our real life together. The first year wasn't easy, but we managed. We video called every day, sometimes twice a day. He sent me pictures of the desert, of the buildings he was constructing. I sent him pictures of the house I was decorating for when he returned, of my shifts at the hospital where I'd finally gotten a job as an ICU nurse. Sarah was in her junior year of college then, studying psychology. She'd visit me on weekends, help me paint rooms, tell me about her classes and her dreams of becoming a therapist. We were closer than ever. Around the 18-month mark, things changed. Nathan's calls became less frequent. He blamed it on work demands, on exhaustion. Sarah's visits stopped too. She said she was swamped with schoolwork, that her senior year was overwhelming. I understood. I was tired too, working 12-hour shifts. I never suspected that their lives were colliding in ways that would destroy everything. Then, Sarah disappeared. It was sudden and strange. She stopped answering my calls, stopped showing up for family dinners. When I drove to her apartment near campus, Her roommate said she'd moved out 2 weeks earlier without explanation. I was frantic. I filed a missing persons report, but the police said she was an adult who had left of her own volition. Daniel and I searched everywhere. We called her friends, her professors. No one knew where she was. The guilt ate at me. Had I been so focused on my own life that I'd missed signs she was struggling? Months passed with no word. My sister had been missing for 4 months, and I was barely holding it together. Nathan tried to comfort me during our increasingly rare calls, but even he seemed distant. I told myself it was stress, that we just needed to hold on until he came home. 10 more months, I kept telling myself. 10 more months and everything would be better. The 3 years finally ended. Nathan texted me his flight information, and for the first time in months I felt excitement. I took the day off work, bought a new dress, got my hair done, and bought those white roses. I stood in that airport terminal for 90 minutes, my heart pounding, rehearsing what I'd say. When passengers started streaming through the arrival doors, I searched for his face. And then I saw him. He was holding hands with a woman I didn't recognize at first. She had a toddler on her hip, maybe 2 years old. A little boy, maybe 4, was holding Nathan's other hand, jumping up and down, calling out, "Daddy, Daddy, look!" And Nathan was smiling at them with a tenderness I recognized. Then the woman turned, and I saw her profile, the nose, the curve of her jaw. Even though her hair was different, I knew. Sarah. My sister Sarah was here with my husband, with children who were calling him Daddy. I don't remember dropping the roses, but I remember Nathan's face when he saw me, the color draining from his cheeks, the panic in his eyes, the way he pulled Sarah closer as if to protect her from me. And Sarah, when she looked at me, didn't look guilty. She looked defiant, like I was the one who had done something wrong. The little boy was confused. The toddler started to cry. Nathan said my name, just Rebecca, in a voice so quiet I barely heard it. And that's when I ran. I turned and ran through the terminal, into my car where I locked the doors and screamed until my throat was raw. I called Daniel. He came immediately and held me while I tried to explain what I'd seen. My phone started buzzing with messages from Nathan, long paragraphs trying to explain, trying to justify. He said he and Sarah had reconnected by accident at an airport 2 years into his contract. They'd gotten coffee, and one thing led to another. He claimed the connection between them was undeniable. Sarah had moved to Dubai to be with him. They'd gotten married 6 months after she disappeared. The children were his, theirs. He'd been planning to tell me, but the timing never seemed right. Sarah's message came an hour later. She said she was sorry I had to find out this way, but that she and Nathan were meant to be together. She said he'd always loved her first, that she'd been in love with him since the day they met, but stepped aside because she knew how much I needed him. She said when they met at that airport, it was fate. She said the last 2 years with him had been the happiest of her life, and that she hoped someday I could forgive her and be happy for them. Be happy for them. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Daniel stayed with me, afraid to leave me alone. On the 4th day, I called Grandma Rose because she needed to know. I drove to her house and sat at her kitchen table and told her everything. I watched her face crumble, watched tears stream down her cheeks. She kept whispering, "How could she? How could they?" And then she clutched her chest. Her face went pale. She couldn't catch her breath. The ambulance came within 8 minutes. They rushed her to the hospital where I worked. Stroke. Stress-induced. The doctor said the shock had been too much for her heart, that at her age these things could be catastrophic. She was stable but weak. I sat by her bedside holding her hand, and that's when I felt it. That shift inside me. I stopped crying. My tears just dried up. Because when pain no longer hurts, when it becomes part of your DNA, it transforms into something else. Determination, rage, the will to survive. Nathan showed up at the hospital on the 6th day. He tried to apologize again, tried to hold my hand. I pulled away and asked him one question. Does she know about the house? The house my parents had left us, the house that was legally in my name. He hesitated, and I knew. He told her it was his. He promised her a life in my home. Word spread through my family, through our community, through my church. Sarah and Nathan had decided to move back here, to integrate their new family into our old life. People took sides. Some blamed me for letting Nathan go overseas alone. Others were horrified but didn't know how to help. Nathan's lawyer informed me that he'd be filing for divorce and seeking his share of marital assets, including the house my parents died for, the house I'd worked 3 jobs to keep. I hired a lawyer I couldn't afford, a woman named Patricia. But fighting required money I didn't have. Grandma Rose needed round-the-clock care after her stroke left her partially paralyzed. I had to cut back my hours at work, which meant less income right when I needed it most. Medical bills piled up. Legal bills piled up. Nathan's lawyer was aggressive, painting me as the cold career woman who'd put work before love, who'd driven him away. The community turned on me slowly. Clients at the hospital started requesting different nurses. Church members stopped sitting near me. I'd overhear whispers about how Sarah had finally found happiness after living in my shadow. How Nathan was such a good father. A complaint was filed against me at work, claiming I'd made an error with a patient's medication. It wasn't true, but the investigation got me suspended. Without my paycheck, I couldn't pay the mortgage. The bank started foreclosure proceedings. Everything I'd built was being systematically destroyed. Sarah called me once during those terrible months. Her voice was cheerful, asking if we could talk like adults, if we could be a family again because Nathan's children deserved to know their aunt and great-grandmother. She said enough time had passed and wasn't it time to forgive? I asked her if she remembered the night our parents died, if she remembered begging me not to let them split us up. She went quiet. I asked if she remembered all the times I'd gone hungry so she could eat, all the school events I'd attended when I was exhausted. And then I told her the truth, that she hadn't just betrayed me. She'd destroyed my ability to trust, to love, to believe in the goodness of people. I hung up before she could respond. That night, I stopped believing in fairness. But I didn't stop fighting. Patricia called me with excitement in her voice. She'd been digging through documents and hired a private investigator who'd agreed to look into Nathan's background for almost nothing. What he found was explosive. Nathan's work history didn't match up. The company he claimed to work for had no record of employing him for the full 3 years. After 18 months, he'd been unemployed for 6 months before working for a completely different organization under a slightly different name. The investigator found irregularities in Nathan's financial records. Large sums of money moving through accounts that didn't match his stated income. It looked like fraud. It looked like money laundering. We dug deeper. The investigator found evidence that Nathan had done this before. Not once, but twice. 2 other women in 2 other states, both married to him under slightly different versions of his name, both left behind when he moved overseas, both believing they were his only wife. One had a child with him. The other had signed over her inheritance to help him start a business that never existed. He was a professional predator who found vulnerable women, earned their trust, married them for their resources, and disappeared. He'd targeted me the same way, except this time he'd fallen for my sister and decided to upgrade while still trying to claim my assets. Patricia filed an emergency motion to freeze Nathan's accounts and halt the divorce proceedings pending a criminal investigation. The district attorney's office got involved. Federal investigators got involved because Nathan's activities crossed state lines. Suddenly, Nathan wasn't the sympathetic husband anymore. He was a suspect. His lawyer backed off as the case transformed into something far more serious. And Sarah started to realize she'd been conned too. The house Nathan had promised her didn't exist, or rather, wasn't his to give. The money he claimed to have saved was likely stolen. The life he'd promised was built on lies and the broken hearts of women who'd believed in him. The investigator uncovered one more thing. After my parents married, my father had inherited the house from his parents with specific trust conditions attached. If the house was ever threatened by marital dissolution, if a spouse tried to claim it through divorce or fraud, the trust would activate and protect the property for the original bloodline. My father had set this up because his own mother had been swindled. The document had been filed away in a safety deposit box I'd never opened. But Patricia found the reference and tracked it down. The trust was still active. The house was protected. Nathan couldn't touch it. The criminal case against Nathan moved forward. Bank fraud, identity fraud, marriage fraud. He was arrested, released on bail, then arrested again when he tried to flee the country. The evidence was overwhelming. He was looking at serious prison time. Sarah, who'd tied her entire identity to being his wife, was left holding the pieces of a life that had never been real. She showed up at my door 6 months after Nathan's arrest. It was late evening, raining, and she looked hollow, defeated. She was alone, no children with her. Every instinct told me to slam the door in her face. But I let her in. Not because I'd forgiven her, but because I needed to understand. She told me everything. How Nathan had pursued her during that chance meeting made her feel special in ways she'd never felt before. How he'd told her I didn't really love him, that our marriage was just convenience. How he'd love-bombed her until she couldn't think straight. How by the time she realized what she'd done, she was already pregnant and terrified and too ashamed to come back. She cried. She apologized. She said she'd been young and stupid and selfish. The children weren't even with her anymore. Nathan's first wife, the one who'd had a child with him years ago, had sued for custody when everything came out. The courts had placed both children with her. Sarah was alone, broke, and homeless because Nathan had convinced her to put everything in his name. She'd lost her education, her dignity, her children, and her sister. She asked if there was any way I could forgive her, and I looked at this broken woman who shared my blood, who I'd loved more than anything, who'd carved out a piece of my soul, and I told her the truth. I didn't hate her. Hate requires energy I no longer had. But I didn't forgive her either, because forgiveness requires trust, and she'd obliterated every foundation we'd ever had. I told her she needed to leave. She left quietly, and I haven't seen her since. I heard she moved to another state, got a job waiting tables, was trying to rebuild from nothing. Nathan went to prison. 7 years for bank fraud, 5 years for identity fraud, running concurrently. It wasn't enough, but it was something. His other victims testified at the trial, and hearing their stories, seeing their faces, recognizing my own pain reflected in theirs, was both devastating and strangely comforting. I wasn't alone. Then something unexpected happened. Nathan's first wife, Diana, reached out to me. She'd been following the case because she'd been trying to get closure for her own nightmare with Nathan for years. We met at a coffee shop, two women who'd loved the same man and paid the same price. She told me her story, eerily similar to mine. She'd been 22 with a baby when Nathan disappeared. After taking in Sarah's children, her 7-year-old son had developed a bond with them. They were half-siblings, all victims of the same man's lies. She was struggling to care for 3 children alone while working full-time. She asked if I'd consider helping, not with money, but with time. With being another adult who could show these children that there were good people in the world. I should have said no, these weren't my children. But when she showed me their pictures, when I saw Sarah's eyes in the little girl and Nathan's nose on the little boy, I felt something crack open inside me. These children hadn't asked to be born into chaos. They needed someone to show them that love didn't have to be cruel. So I said yes. I started slow, watching the kids one afternoon a week while Diana ran errands. Then it became twice a week, then 3 times. The children were wary at first, but kids are resilient. They forgave quickly. They trusted easily. They just wanted to be loved. And somewhere in reading them bedtime stories and helping with homework, I found something I thought Nathan and Sarah had stolen forever. I found purpose. Not the crushing weight of obligation, but the lighter choice to care for someone simply because they needed it and I could help. A year after Nathan went to prison, Diana and I had become real friends. We'd both been through hell and come out scarred but standing. When she got a job offer in another state, she asked if I wanted to come with them. We could co-parent the kids, split expenses, build something stable together. It wasn't conventional, but it was real and honest. I said yes. We moved 6 months ago. The kids call me Aunt Becca, and I'm teaching the oldest to ride a bike, helping the middle one with her reading, and rocking the youngest to sleep when he has nightmares. Grandma Rose lives with us now too, in a small suite we built onto the house. She's regained some mobility and loves having great-grandchildren around, even if they came to us through tragedy. I won't pretend this is the life I imagined. I thought I'd have my own children with a man I loved, in the house my parents left me, surrounded by the sister and brother I'd raised. Instead, I'm raising my ex-husband's children with his other ex-wife in a city where nobody knows our story. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes the family you're given breaks you, and sometimes the family you choose saves you. These children didn't destroy my life. Their parents did. And they deserve better than to carry that guilt. So I show up every day and love them. Not because they're mine by blood, but because love is a choice we make over and over. And choosing to love in the face of betrayal, choosing to build in the face of destruction, choosing to keep your heart open when every instinct tells you to close it, that's not weakness. That's the strongest thing a human being can do. What would you have done in my place? When you discovered the ultimate betrayal from the 2 people you loved most, would you have chosen revenge, or would you have found a way to turn pain into purpose? Do you believe that some betrayals are unforgivable, or can healing sometimes come from the most unexpected places? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your stories matter here. And if this story moved you or reminded you of your own strength, please subscribe for more stories of courage, justice, and the complicated beauty of choosing love even when love has hurt you. Because the next story may stay with you even longer than this one. Thank you for listening.